Welcome everyone to our Teacher of the Year interview with Dr. Kristie Jo Redfering. I'm real excited to have her here. She was the CEC Teacher of the Year and was awarded to her in January, as well as to the Nina Harris ESE Center where she works. Real quick background on who I am. I'm Richard Capone, the CEO and co-founder of Let's Go Learn, and we are the vendor sponsor of the CEC Teacher of the Year. And the reason why we do this is because for us, we're a ed tech company. We have a really highly diagnostic reading and math assessment and differentiated instruction program. And we specialize in supporting students with IEPs as well as MTSS students as well. Now, for us, what we found is by being a real next-gen technology company, it's not just about having good tools. You can have the best tools on the market, but it's about implementation, right? And so we found that we really have to have great teachers and administrators who know how to take new technology and implement it. Likewise, being a teacher, you have to know how to do best practices, change behaviors. A lot of it's organizational. And Dr. Kristie Jo Redfering has been recognized for this by CEC, and so we're real excited to be interviewing her. So, Dr. Redfering, welcome to the interview.
Hi, good morning.
Great. So, I understand you're over in Florida, and you're part of the Nina Harris ESC Center. I wanted to start off with a few questions about yourself, and then we'll switch over to the center and talk about some of the larger problems you've been dealing with. So tell us a little bit, first of all, how did you get into teaching?
Well, I basically come from a family of teachers. My mother was an ESE teacher. She taught students with physical and cognitive disabilities for her entire career for 50 years. My grandmother was a teacher. I have aunts that are teachers, many cousins that are teachers, and my dad was a professor, a university professor. So I mean, really, it just kind of was a natural thing for me to go into education. It was very highly valued in my family. And so, it was just, I started working with kids in my mom's classroom when I was in middle school. And so for me, it was just, there was never really a lot of question, like, what do I want to be when I grow up kind of thing. It was always just kind of, that's what I was going to do. So that's pretty much how I got into it. And my career shifted. I was always at ESE, but the populations that I worked with changed, and the grade levels that I've worked with have changed through the years. So I have experience, with elementary, middle, and now I'm in high school. I was a behavior specialist for 10 or 12 years, working with students with autism and students with behavior disorders. Taught learning disabilities, and then now in my current position, I'm high school students with extensive support needs.
All right, great. So as you started off in teaching, did you first start off as maybe a regular classroom teacher, and then did you progress? How did you end up getting extra credentials and working with different students with different disabilities?
No, I knew that I wanted to do ESE, and so my degree is in special ed. And okay. I went in, I was a resource teacher initially, teaching reading and math. And then I moved into being a behavior specialist. And so I did that for quite a while. And that was working with students with autism. And also I was on a gen ed campus, and so also with a lot of students with behavior issues. So I really loved that. But my son was born in 2013, and he has cerebral palsy. And so I had this new exposure to an ESD center and what these teachers were doing with kids with very complex needs. And I just absolutely fell in love with his school, Nina Harris, and I tried over and over and over to get in, but nobody really, at that time, there wasn't a lot of turnover. People loved the school, and they would stay there for their entire careers. So I was just waiting for someone to retire, basically. And somebody did retire, and so I got that position, and I've been there. I'm going on my 5th year there. So.
Oh, that's great. So let me ask you, I know a lot of times there's a lot of teachers will struggle just because, there's a high turnover in teaching. Um, what would you say, has kept you motivated and teaching for so many years? And maybe what is some advice you'd give to teachers if they are feeling like, hey, maybe they're struggling right now, wanting to stay in teaching?
I mean, that has changed for me and evolved over my career as well. I mean, in the beginning, it was because I felt like I had some control, I had some ability to impact students, and I still feel that. But I also feel that at this point, my why is I look at these families. So the students are the core of that, but that I learned through my career that what a teacher does impacts a family so deeply that we don't know. And I didn't know in the past, but now I know. And so being able to form those connections with families and really there's a lot of peripheral stuff and bureaucracy and things that you have to deal with and deadlines and paperwork. But when you get right down to it, it's about those relationships that you have with your kids and with the families. And so all the other things they're gonna get sorted. The focus needs to be on when you're looking that child in the face and you're talking to those parents on the phone, that those relationships are, the motivation. That's why we do what we do.
That's great. So you're able to really stay motivated and know, hey, why am I doing this? I'm motivated because you're helping students, you're helping families. And, I'm sure a lot of times people are probably real grateful having that personal touch and your understanding.
Yeah. I mean, for me, and one of the teachers that I work with who's next door to me is a newer teacher. And she, when she first started teaching, our rooms connect. And, the advice that I gave to her was you find the person that's the person that's optimistic, the person that's going to bring you up. Because we all know that in every school, there's conversations that are had that are not always positive, among teachers and staff. And so you have to find those people that are connected with their why, that are connected with that motivation, because you'll feed off of that. But that, yeah, for me, any kind of frustration that I might have in a meeting or anything that happens, I go back into my classroom and I might take like 5 or 10 minutes to go around and give my kids a hug and just say, I'm so happy that you're here. And just like having that, that moment, that touch it's huge. It resets me.
Oh, that's great. So let me ask you this. Let's say over the years when you've been teaching at different schools, I know another issue that sometimes pops up is maybe the administrators aren't as helpful, or, what would you say is a good strategy for teachers to overcome maybe administrative challenges, so that they could keep staying focused on that? What would you do in a situation like that?
I mean, I happen to have really great administrators. Both of my administrators are awesome and they're super supportive. And I think though that I've learned that when I go to talk to an administrator, I don't just say what I get away from my position on something and I talk about the underlying interests, right? The interest is in student success. So often, I would bring data and say, these are the areas where we're really struggling and this is what I think could help us. Can you, what do we need to do to make this happen? And I think it's very powerful when you come in like with an organized idea about what you need from your administrator. And if you can come to them, not just coming to complain that things are not going well, but having data to back it up. Like this is the struggle that I'm having. And I've never had an administrator that hasn't responded well to that. So that's kind of you have to understand that, they have constraints put upon them that we don't see, that's behind their office door. We don't necessarily see the pressures that they're under and the requirements that they have to meet. And so, for us, we need to we need to do our part by, hey, these are the things that I need and these are why, and this is how it's going to support our school improvement plan, for example, or connect it for the administrator, what you need, what support you need to so that they can see that it's also beneficial for their goals,
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So don't just complain, but really think it through, having data that allows them an opportunity to act, right? I mean, in some ways, I think administrators a lot of times are firefighting, right? They're trying to put out fire after fire. And so if you pose a logical problem and here's some data, maybe you guys can both come up with the same solution. Yeah, that's great.
I mean, we're all on the same team. And this is what I try to tell people when I hear people feeling frustrated, not just with administration, but, with the demands of being a teacher. I'm like, or feeling like one person isn't carrying their weight. We're all on the same team. We're all, our goals are all the same. We have to, we don't come in there. This isn't like a win-lose. This is like a win-win. We have to find a way for everybody to come together, to provide the support that's necessary. So, you just have to view your colleagues not as adversaries or someone that you're competing with, but people that you need to support and that, you need the support of.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like saying in those situations, it's a win-win-win, right? So it's not like 1 + 1 = 2. If people collaborate, 1 + 1 = 3. And I think it, keeps a positive attitude. Let me ask you this. I know one of the struggles, and we work with a lot of different CASE units, different state units, as well as national CASE, and that's the Council of Administrators of Special Education. What would you say we could do, nationally to help recruit more teachers, especially into special education? Because obviously right now it's been at a low and a lot of people have left. What do you think we could do to help that? As a teacher, what would you say?
I mean, they're the obvious answers, right? I mean, they need to be paid better. They need more support in classrooms, and I wouldn't say that that's necessarily across the board, but I know that there's issues in a lot of schools in classrooms with overcrowding because there are teacher shortages. So I think, figuring out ways to make it, you have to make it appealing. You have to make it desirable. And, the core of, there are a lot of people out there who I think would be excellent teachers and who would love it and be fulfilled by it, but they don't feel like they're going to be able to make a living wage, and raise a family, particularly if you're a single person that has children. That's pretty tough, and I think the benefit of time, so that we can do our jobs really well. Everybody, that time resource is so valuable, and we try our best to make the most of a 30-minute planning period in a day, but it's tough. It is tough, and so we need more personnel. We need more people in there, and we need to pay them well. We need to pay them their worth.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I know before we were talking about that, even logistics, right? Sometimes some tiny adjustments in schedules, master, calendars, figuring out how do we get those planning periods and how can you maximize them? Is it helpful to have sometimes even certain teachers and departments planning at the same time? And people don't think about it. Having a planning period when you're just there all by yourself is not as helpful as if you had a colleague who is maybe in the same department as you.
Right. And then the other part of that is, especially when you have newer teachers that are coming in, and I shouldn't even say that because veteran teachers too, I would love to have more time to be able to go and observe other classrooms and other teachers. I would love to be able to have coverage so that I could go in and see what's happening in the other building. What are the middle school teachers doing? Well, I want to go and watch them. And for new teachers, especially, to be able to go and watch a variety of classrooms, but they hit the ground running, right? They come in and they've got this class, and we don't have coverage to allow for us to collaborate in that way, to really learn from each other.
Yeah. So in other words, you need some kind of systemic way to make sure that that happens. You know, it's funny internally at our company, Let's Go Learn, we have something called the whirlwind, right? So we say the problem with the whirlwind is the whirlwind takes up everyone's time every day, and then it's hard to do these other things. And I like to think what you almost need is a way to make sure the whirlwind doesn't interfere with these planning periods, with these ability to be able to go out there and observe other classes, maybe even mentoring programs, having a really solid mentoring program and making
Right,
sure that program is a part of the culture of your organization and
for
doesn't get,
sure.
doesn't, yeah.
And I
So,
love, we're building a mentoring, well, we've had a mentoring program, but we're working to like really make it more effective and useful for our teachers. But I really like the idea of getting veteran teachers out there to look at what, I mean, it's really easy when you've been teaching for a long time and you have your style and you have your strategies and you have things that you have worked for you in the past. And so our classrooms become a little bit insulated, I think. And
mhm,
I think it's important for us to see different ways of doing things in action. Like we forget that this is like not the only way to do things. We might
yeah,
find something that we can do better, so giving those opportunities for veteran teachers to also get out there and observe and be mentored. I mean,
innovate,
I love
yeah,
the idea. I'm going to be mentoring this year, and I love the idea of having a young teacher coming in that is going to come with all these new ideas and all this new learning, and I'm going to learn from him or her. There are going to be things that they're going to bring to the table that are brand new to me, and I'm excited about that. I'm like, wow, this is going to be great. It's like,
that's great.
just like kind of like a fresh start. Like, wow.
That's awesome. So let me ask you this. What do you see the role? I mean, given that we're a technology company and I've always been very technology biased, but what do you see the role of technology in special education?
I really love I love the fact that technology like learning programs are so appealing to students, specifically to students on the spectrum. We get a lot really high engagement when we're getting them in any kind of tech. And so I love that. But as far as teachers go, I like the idea of being able to come up with learning activities using tech that are tracked. So data that's being tracked, IEP goals that we can track using those kinds of activities that students are engaged in, helping us to write objectives and goals that are, backed by like really solid data. And a lot of these, like some of the things that really, I mean, they go in and they do
No,
these
I get it.
activities and you're like, oh, wow, look at this. I had no idea that this was an area of concern. So yeah, I love it for that.
Well, I chuckle because you don't use necessarily Let's Go Learn, your teacher of the
No.
year, and we're an emerging company. But it's funny because one of the things we struggle with is our diagnostic data writes write the goals for the teacher. It finds all the
Yeah,
data of
that's
what should be the
amazing.
short-term goals. But it's hard to, what's hard for us is everyone is so busy. They're used to doing things a certain way. And how do you break out of it and say, hey, here's a new tool I could use? It's like you buy a new tool, whatever it could be, and sometimes it sits. Like if you bought a new,
Yeah,
some
yeah.
new device for your kitchen, it could sit for a couple of months before you actually break it out. But it's always a hard thing to implement technology. So I would argue that I know while the kids like it, a lot of time teachers have a hard time finding the time to do it because they're so overwhelmed. So how do you think, what would help with teachers and schools implementing new technology?
Well, I mean, one of the things that's always helpful to me when there's anything new is to be able to try it with one student. Like,
Mm,
let's like give it like that then my student would be my pilot, because then
hmm
you're not sort of overwhelmed with like all of this information and the time that it would take to go. I tend to have well, we all do at our centers, we have smaller classes. But I mean, I think that if you can just, or I mean, obviously training is super helpful, like at
yeah,
preschool or over the summer, offering trainings, finding one person at the school who's, super tech savvy, have them learn the program. Sometimes
yeah,
it's easier for me to learn from somebody who's going to sit and talk with me about it, rather than like having to figure it out on my own. Like, oh, I have this program, my kids are using it now, what do I do with it? And to have somebody that's like, okay, well, this is what you do, I mean, I'm not super tech. I'm kind of like, I didn't have a computer until I was a full grown woman. So, for me, it's a little bit of a struggle, but it is nice if you have a tech person, and we have an awesome tech person, and to be able to say, hey, can you come down to my room and like help me with this, but to have that one point person at the school is, I think, would be really helpful.
So they, in a sense, they operationalize it for you. Like if you get that one excited tech person, they can say, okay, this is how I translate this tool. This is how you could use it, Dr. Redfering, in your classroom. You could use it for writing your IEPs. You could use it for progress monitoring or whatever it may be, or for teaching students in certain situation where they need certain kind of instruction. Got it. That's interesting. Yeah, that's been what we've been hearing a lot, with customers we talk to, is operationalization. How do you operationalize something for all the different stakeholders, for all the different teachers, different roles? And I think a lot of times it's really hard to figure that out, right? Because again, every single role is different. Like the top level is no child left behind. We're going to help everyone, right? But then what does that mean to you as a teacher? What does that mean to someone as a principal, someone as a paraprofessional? Yeah. Well, let me shift gears a little bit and let's talk about the Nina Harris Center, right? I know part of getting the Teacher of the Year award was, obviously you did an amazing job. You're an amazing teacher, but also the center is recognized as well. And so what were some of maybe you could just tell us about Nina Harris Center, and then we'll talk about some of the challenges that you guys overcame.
Yeah, for sure. So it is an ESE center that serves students with significant cognitive impairments and extensive support needs. So we are elementary through extended transition. So we have students up to the age of 22. And we have some self-contained ASD classrooms. And then we have our supported varying exceptionalities and participatory varying exceptionality students kind of interspersed in classrooms. We will have students with autism in those classrooms as well. And we serve, I think we're kind of in the range of around 180 to 200 students in our center. We have a full nursing staff. We have 5 full-time nurses. We have adapted PE. We have a swimming pool. We have occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech language, multiple therapists in all of those areas. And we are very heavily working on communication. We have many of our students, the majority of our students are not verbal. We use core communication and AAC for our students. And I'm in high school, elementary. We're all in the same building, but we have kind of different wings. But it's our biggest challenge has been the shift we've been working toward over the past 3 years. This really heavy communication focus. And so for us, I think the biggest obstacle was getting teachers comfortable with it, because everybody kind of had their own system of, somebody might use Boardmaker, somebody might use some other system for visuals. And now we have a common core board that's used throughout the school. Every student has access to it in different forms. Of course, they're all differentiated, but it's been, that's been tough. And I have to say it was tough for me too, because I had to learn how to model that effectively. I had to learn how to build that into the lessons that I was already delivering. And so I think that's been our biggest challenge in the time that I've been there. I've been there for 4 years, but we've seen really great successes with our students using those core boards and really expanding their ability to communicate more consistently and reliably.
So how did they? So that's probably one of the big things that was being recognized is this transformation, implementing these core boards. What was some of the success for that implementation? Like, how did it start off? Was it like someone had a vision, say, hey, this is our goal, and then how was that operationalized into practice at Nina Harris?
Well, we got a new principal,
Uh-huh.
and it was her vision. I mean, it wasn't just her vision. There were a lot of people, really wanted something that was, that was more universal within our school. But she had this vision, and she came up with her 3-year plan along with her leadership team. And so, it's just been implemented incrementally. So we started with just everybody had pretty intensive training. And when I say everybody, I mean everybody, our plant operators, our associates, nursing staff, everybody in the building, office staff were trained in how to use the core board with the students. So the training was kind of step one. Step two was, okay, we're going to work with our speech pathologists to develop systems that are, differentiated for every student. Some students may have a full core board. Other students may have an eye gaze frame that they use. Some students may have flip charts. So it just depends on, where they were with their communication. And so that was kind of phase two. Okay, we're going to differentiate this. Phase three was, okay, everybody is going to have access to their core board all day long, no matter where we are in the building. So that was kind of a challenging thing because we had to develop all kinds of arms, and we got a 3D printer so that we could attach to students' wheelchairs, how did we had to program, if the student had a communication device, we had to program the device so that it was reflective of the system that we were using at school. So that was kind of stage 3, right? And now we are in, how are we building this into our academics? So we're really heavily focused right now on literacy. Karen Erickson was sort of our guru as far as literacy goes. And so, now we're really working heavily on, implementing, using this core board, using these, these communication strategies in a more academic kind of a sense.
Yeah, got it. So you mentioned a bunch of different stuff. So let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Like a 3D printer, in order to allow everyone to have a core board, available to them all the time. So
Right.
did you all, do you have a good grant writer at your school site, or what is some of the stuff you do to help, fund different aspects?
Funding?
Yeah.
Is that what you're asking me? How are we funding this? Okay, well, I'm not really, that's not really kind of my knowledge base, but I do know that we use a lot of Title I money for these types of programs for purchasing what we need physically, like the 3D printer and arms, and all of that kind of technology stuff that we need. And our principal went to our ESE supervisor and said, hey, we found this curriculum that we really like, and we're going to use our Title I money, but we're thinking that you guys should pay for it, because we didn't really have any curriculum prior to this. We didn't have a formal curriculum available to us. And so they said, they looked it over, met with the company and said, yep, we're going to buy it for you guys, but we're also rolling it out district-wide. So that was sort of how that came about in terms of how we're funding the new curriculum to go along with MELD. But yeah, I mean, we're lucky that we get the Title I funds that we get. And we have this amazing behavior specialist at our school who has raised over $100,000 for our school through doing fundraising and partnering with our community. And so that's been huge. I mean, she's incredible. She's has so many relationships in the community, and she's raised so much money for her school.
Well, that's great. I mean, you know, it's interesting. There's definitely money out there because a lot of people do want to help, you know, fund education, but it's tough sometimes. Again, if everyone is so busy with their day jobs that they don't have time to do these extras, so it's almost like you have to have somebody who's passionate about that, and that's great that you guys have that. So that might be something for other schools to do, is make sure you have somebody who can help with funding and, you know, community outreach and stuff like that. Yeah. As far as the you know, what's next on the horizon for the Nina Harris right now? I mean, are they continuing the implementation? Because I know before we talked a little bit about, you know, extensive support needs students in that group. You know, obviously it's not homogeneous, right? But it's a very particular, I don't want to say niche, but it's a particular group of students in schools. You guys have a very, you know, focused goal. What are some of the things that you are working on now to improve and take things to the next level? Or is it more implementation and making sure things are better, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you know, for me, because, you know, I've only been in this particular job for 4 years. And so for me, I feel like it's just been this like, super steep learning curve.
Yeah.
And, you know, so I mentioned before, I would like to be able to go and see what other people are doing. And we had talked before, Richard, about, you know, finding other groups. And I did go on Facebook, and there is a group for teachers of students with extensive support needs. And so I'm kind of going through that, kind of getting myself familiar with that and what that looks like in terms of what they can offer. But, you know, for me, my goals for teaching is I just want to get better and better at the things that I can see are working, you know, using the MELD communication, using the new curriculum that we have. So for me, it's just about improving on the systems that we already have. I think that for the school, one of the things that we really, really want to focus on is bringing those families in so that they can implement the strategies that we're doing at school that are working at home. And I mean, I'm super passionate about involving the families, and I this past year provided families with some MELD communication resources. I built them some systems and some core boards and things like that. Reminders, like I had a student that vocalizes a lot and loudly, and so we had some systems that were working with some visuals. You know, of course, sent those home, and mom was like, wow, this is working, this is crazy, can you make me a core board using a task analysis for making her bed? And I'm like, sure. You know, so I know that as a school, we really want to bring parents into that fold and help them to develop systems at home that are in parallel to what we're doing at school, so that it's more functional and generalized.
Yeah, and I know that sort of falls into the family engagement, right? There's a lot of districts have a family engagement department or division or person in charge.
Right.
And so it sounds like maybe integrating that back in. Sometimes I feel like when we talk to schools that the family engagement is almost a little disconnected. It's almost like it's a little bit more PR, right? Where, you know, what you've been doing is actually bringing it into the teacher level, because obviously you're getting involved. That's interesting, actually, to hear how you've operationalized it.
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, it's just like I said, in our school building, that we have to view each other as teammates, and nobody knows these kids. You know, when you're dealing with a student that's nonverbal and they're new to your classroom, where are you going to get your information so that you can get started and not, you know, and have a ball to carry, right? You go to the family. And families want, you know, I think sometimes families have often been viewed as adversarial to the teacher, that they're afraid that they're going to get in trouble, or the parent's going to complain about something. And that's not my experience. My experience is when you are involving them and you value their knowledge and their experience, then you're going to get a lot back. And you created a team, you know, you created an opportunity so that you're leveraging what the students walking in your classroom with, you're leveraging that knowledge and the way that they learn and what they've been exposed to so they can learn in your classroom. So yeah,
And
I
I'm
mean,
sure,
you just have to change your mind. I just feel
yeah,
like people just have to change their viewpoint and their perspective. It's all about perspective taking, right? You know, you
yeah.
have to be able to put yourself in another person's shoes sometimes.
Well, I could see why you got Teacher of the Year. You're very empathetic, you're very collaborative, and it makes sense, right? What you're saying is you're both out for the child's best interest, and so
Right.
you're team child, right? You're fighting for that, and I think the parent sees that genuine desire of yours, and again, it makes a 1 + 1 = 3, right? It's a
Right.
win-win-win. That's
Yeah, I
great.
like
So,
that.
and by the way, I've been integrating questions in from the audience, just so you know.
Oh, okay.
I've been able to
Okay.
just they've been pushed to me. Here's one of the questions: is what gets you excited about the future of education?
What gets me excited about what?
The future of education.
Um, it's the same thing that gets me excited about the future of our communities, and it's that we have this pool. I have my daughter's 22, almost 22, and my niece is 24, and being around them and their friends, these are savvy, kind people. These young people have so much to offer us. They have new ideas. They think in different ways. I mean, we talk about. I hear people talk about Gen Z and
Yeah.
whatever millennials and the whole thing. And for me, it's like we have to like they know so many things that I don't know, and they're creative and they're going to come along and they're going to they're going to figure out stuff that we didn't even that never even crossed our minds. I'm just excited about young people coming up and making things happen. It's going to be great.
That's great you say that, because so my daughter's 22 and my son's 24, and I have to
Uh,
admit I've learned a lot from some of the conversations we've had, and I
yeah,
realized that even at the high school level, this generation, they're really thinking through things. I feel like
yeah,
in retrospect, when I was in high school, I was so insensitive. It was like just boom,
yeah,
I had very surface thoughts, but then they're really thinking this through. Like, oh my God, they have really thought through these issues, and I agree with you. I do think they're very compassionate, right?
yeah,
Fundamentally, they've grown up being more sensitive, and which is a good thing, right? Because I think in our world we need more sensitivity, um,
absolutely.
especially in the bigger issue we talked before about is I do think education is key to everything, like you said, because you know it's a start, and it's what's hard about our society is we have a hard time funding education because the results don't happen right away. Hey, we'll have a natural disaster and we put money to fix something, right?
Right,
But do we put money in now to help something 10 years later or 20 years later?
right.
We do
Very,
have a
very,
hard time
yeah,
funding.
very short-sighted, very short-sighted.
Yeah, and that's a hard
But
thing. I
but
mean,
yeah, these young, I mean, I believe it. The younger people are going to come in and they're going to clean house. It's going to look so good. I have faith.
oh, that's great. That's great. I'm excited about that. Okay, so I'm probably going to take one more question and we'll probably wrap it up. So what advice would you give? Here's another question someone came in. What advice would you give to new teachers who are new to the profession? If there's some new teachers out there listening.
Yeah, I mean, uh, just be open. You have to be open. You have to be flexible and open. You have to be open to, you have to be flexible because things are not going to go. I mean, in my entire career, I've never had a day that went exactly like I planned. It's just not going to happen, and that's okay. I mean, but you have to be open to your students. You have to be open to your colleagues. You have to be open to feedback. Seeking. This is not like an end game. Like, oh, I'm going to suddenly be a great teacher. You're starting off. You're a great teacher, right? I mean, this is why you're here. You graduated, you got through your internships, and so obviously you're doing something right. But there's no end point to that. You're going to continue to learn new things and get better, and you have to be open to that feedback, and open to your families. It's just a matter of like, you can't take things like super personally. We're on the same team. right? So that, I mean, that's the best advice I can give. Breathe through it. You know, you're going to be, everybody's, if you started this job, if you got to your first year, you can get to your 30th year. You know, it's a process. Everything is going to change and be fluid. So hang in there. It'll be good.
All right. Well, thank you so much. This has been really, really fun. And I think that's going to be the
Thank
last
you.
word. I like that. Be open, hang in there. Thank you
Yeah,
so much. And
thank
everyone else, we will be sending this recording out to everyone who's registered. And I'll have a great rest of your day, Dr. Redfering.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Bye, everyone.